Hi everyone, good morning. How are you doing today? I got my sewing tips book out because I was winding a bobbin and it reminded me of something. So if I don't put the book right out in front of me, I'll forget. So we'll do our sewing tip when class starts. We only have a minute or so. So if anyone is sewing along or has done the first part, which was last Saturday, that would be May 1st, 2021. Let me know in the chat. Say hi. How's it going? I have to have somebody to chat with. You want to make sure that you have your center of your table runner, have everything all neatly pressed for today. And also, I had to measure mine before I came on live because I had to put it on the floor. I had no place else to put it. I had to put it on the floor, and I didn't think you wanted to wait while I went down on the floor and had to get myself back up again. But you want to be on a nice flat surface for the whole, have your whole runner laying out flat because we're going to measure for our strips. And you can't see my strip that well. It's white. Rhonda picked the white last week, so I'm doing white as we're going to have 3 borders. And it'll be the same on both sides. So let's just give it one more minute. And get ourselves situated. But if you want to go ahead and get your runner ironed or pressed, and our first strips are 1.5 inches. We won't determine your length until you measure your runner. And I'm going to show you in just half a minute how to actually do that. We'll just give a little more time for people to get settled in. I did a little extra sound check because Thursday night I didn't have sound. My program changed settings. I've yet to figure out how it does that, but we go with the flow. Okay, so let's get started again. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is having a good Saturday morning. I'll try not to take up too much of your day, and happy Mother's Day to everyone who has children, pets, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, and y'all hopefully get to visit each other. Y'all, I sound like I'm from the South now. Okay, so let's do the tip of the day first. So if you've been following along with me, you know that I had sent in my straight stitch. This only does a straight stitch machine for service, and I need to use it a few times to make sure everything is working correctly. And I have suggested before, whenever you send your machine in for service, don't bring it home and put it in the closet. Run it to make sure the service corrected whatever issue you might have. Because as a rule, I believe, and I'm not positive, but generally a service comes with so many days, 30 days, 10 days, 90 days, whatever it may be, depending on the store or the repair shop, like warranty to warranty the work they did to your machine. So if you get a repair done and you take it home and put it in the closet and don't take it out till next year and it's still doing the same thing, you're not under that repair warranty anymore. And if you're not sure if the place that you have your machine serviced has a service warranty, just ask them. I think they all do, but I can't swear to that. So tip for today is number 21. And on this straight stitch machine, the bobbin loads, first of all, it loads on the side, which is a little different, but it's a bottom loading bobbin. So instead of top loading. So it takes a different type of bobbin, it has a metal bobbin case. And this morning, I wound another bobbin because I thought I was low on thread. And, I assumed, okay, so we know what that means. And I really didn't need another bobbin. And I don't use this machine all the time. And let's just say that I put in a red thread or a green thread, and I'm not going to use it again on this machine. I can take this bobbin, and hopefully it'll fit, the little hole fits, and I can sew off of it. So I don't have another machine up. So if this bobbin fits on your spool pin, which I think it should, you can sew off of a bobbin, or you can rewind onto another bobbin. So my other machines take a different type of bobbin. First of all, it's plastic and it's deeper. It's wider than this one. So rather than waste this, and this is true on your regular machine, sometimes we're using a color thread top and bottom that we don't use all the time, and all of a sudden, we've got we overfilled our bobbin for what we were doing. You can put this on your machine, and your regular bobbins, I know, do fit on your spool pin, and sew off of it as if this was a spool of thread. And also, if you wind a bobbin and it didn't wind well, put this back up on the top and wind it onto another bobbin. Don't take this all off and throw it away. First of all, it'll take forever, and you'll just get irritated more as you're unthreading it. And you had that's a lot of thread on there. So a bobbin can go up on your spool pin and either be used for sewing, so you would thread it through like a regular spool of thread, or if you didn't wind it well, you're going to wind it onto a new bobbin. So that's our tip for today. Let me just set that all aside. I don't want to lose my bobbin. Okay, so last week we did our quilt as you go, and our back is all on there, and our batting, and we went down the center. So today we're going down the sides this way. So we're going to work our way out now, and putting on our strips. Now, and this holds true for when you're making a regular quilt. It's not quilt as you go also. So I always say just try to keep the same habits no matter which way you're doing things, whether it's quilt as you go or you're just making a quilt top and you're putting your borders on. You just don't cut a border longer than the quilt and stitch it on and then cut off the difference. That'll give you a little bit of wave in your quilt. So when it gets quilted or you quilt it, it's got to wrinkle up somewhere. And so you don't want that. So on a regular quilt, and this is a little skinny, but I want you to practice it just the same. So when you measure, because we want to cut these strips exactly what we need them to be. So when you measure, especially on a bigger quilt, you want to measure top to bottom on the edge. Now, don't go right to the edge. Go about an inch in, because your edge, especially if it's not quilt as you go, can be a little bit wavy or not quite straight, I guess. And so you want to go in about an inch, measure down, write that down, go to the center, measure it, and you're going to be on a flat surface. So if it's a quilt, you're going to be on your floor and everything's all spread out. You've already pressed your quilt. Everything is nice. And then you're going to do the other side and measure down. And again, stay about an inch away from the edge. And you take those three measurements. So say it's a quilt, and this one's 80, and this one's 81, and this one's 80. So you take the three and together and divide them. So you get about 80 and a half. And that will help your quilt sit flat. So you may have to be, you don't want to be off like 2 or 3 inches. Generally, it's an inch or less. Generally, it's like a half inch or so. If you're off by a couple inches, then you gotta redo something. So then you want to cut that strip to that exact measurement, that border strip, to that exact measurement. And then you're going to pin it on, and you may have to just tug it a little bit to get the end. So I would pin it at the top, pin it at the bottom, and then flatten your quilt out or whatever your project is, and you'll see it kind of lay flat. Put a pin in the middle and a couple pins, and off you go. So one edge may be a ½ inch different from the other edge, because for a quilt, you might be 50, 60, 80 inches across, the difference between the two. But if you make those borders the same size with the average of your measurements, it's magical. Everything's going to lay nice and flat. When you put your next border on, measure again just to be on the safe side. Because generally, you're going to have to measure again, because normally, you're going to have also a top and a bottom border. And again, top and bottom border, you'd measure this way. At each edge in the center, divide it by 3. Once you put another border on the top and the bottom, your side is going to be a different measurement, because you've added more length and also more width. So with each border you put on, you're going to measure again. Don't say, oh, well, I put a 2-inch border on, so I'll add 2 inches. Trust me, if you just measure, I know it's a pain in the neck, especially if it's on the floor, but if you would just measure, you'll be a happier person for it. So I've measured mine, and mine was 33.5, which is a long way from my 40. So I'm not quite sure what I cut my batting at. I could have miscut. Who's to say? But I'm okay with that. So I thought, because I only have a little area to cut my strips, so before I cut them, I put a pin in right where the cut will be, and I'm just going to make sure that where my pin is correct, only because I'm working in this little short distance here. So I've got both my borders, because they're both going to be the same. They're both going to be the same length. Left and right are going to be the same length. So I can go ahead and cut them. So now my strips are right. Now for this project, Quilt As You Go, all of your strips, all your borders are going to be that same length, because we're not putting any at the top and the bottom. At least I'm not. You might be, but I'm not. So, and if you were, you would have needed more batting up here. Excuse me. So you remember when we did this, we might be a little jaggedy along here. So what we want to do is, to make it easier, I'm just going to set these aside. Hope I don't forget where I put them. I'm going to take my long ruler that I just had in my hand 2 minutes ago. And and I know that shines on there. So let's see if I can come in a little closer for part of this. And yeah, how's that? So I want to find along this side the part of the strip that would be the skinniest. So if you look here, so you can see how I've got extra fabric out there, but down here I don't have any extra. So I have to pick the part that is the skinniest, because I don't want to line up out here and then I get down to this part and I'm not stitching my border onto my strips. And the other thing I want to do is make sure that my ruler is straight. So I want to look, let me get over here. I want to look along here and make sure make sure that my lines are lining up with my strips. Are they all going to be perfect? Probably not, but that's okay. You're just going to kind of average it out. So hopefully at the top, you're even. And then I'm just going to watch down along here to make sure that my ruler is straight. And the only way I can tell if it's straight is to my sewing. So we use 2.5-inch strips. Makes it kind of handy for our ruler because it's 2-inch finished. And now you have 2-inch blocks. Now, is every one of your strips 2 inches finished? Maybe not. Maybe not. You might have taken a little bit more seam on one than another. It's okay. So what I want to do is I'm going to take my pen and I'm going to mark along my ruler because we can't trim this off because we need the batting for our quilt as you go. So I'm going to make a really dark line so you can see it. And you won't make so dark a line. I always worry that if you make a really dark line that the line is too thick. But there you go. So you can see mine. And let me just get it finished. So I'm going to move up. And again, hopefully you've got a little bit bigger area than I do. But if you don't and you're like me, that's okay too. With my limited area, for those of you that might also have a limited area, you'll see how that works out. So I want to make sure I have a good 4 or 5 inches of my ruler lined up with the line I've drawn. So I make sure I'm in the same place. And again, I'm going to look on these sides, on these horizontal parts, to make sure that my ruler is nice and straight. And I'm going to continue. And in some places, my fabric, like right here, my fabric is right at the edge. So my actual drawing is right on the batting at the edge. And you'll see that in a minute. I'll hold it up. I'll hold the whole thing up. Hopefully I've got it dark enough there. I put my ruler where I can find it again. So you can see my line. And in this little area, because my fabric is correct, the line just isn't going to be there because it's there in the batting. And then this part is straight. And then here we go. Here we go. So you can see my line all the way up. And I'm going to use that line, let me back up a little bit, to set down my first strip right side down, because we're going to sew this and then flip it over. And I'm going to start at the top, and I'm going to align the edge of my strip with that line. So the line is right there. Oh, see it? So I'm lining up my strip with the edge of that line. And also, I want to make sure I'm aligned at the top. So I'm going to stick this pin in here. I want to make sure I stay nice and straight, and I want to go down to the bottom because this is what I do normally with a quilt. So I'm going to use the same method, because if I learn one way instead of 10 different ways, I'll be okay. So I'm going to pin the bottom. I'm going to flatten this out. And I just want to make sure I'm lined up with that line. And put some more pins in. Don't pin every inch. That's too many pins. And again, I want to make sure I stay nice and flush. I want to check to make sure I'm not over the line. So in this case, I'm right at the edge of my fabric. So again, I want to make sure this is nice and flat. And you know, I forgot, we got to put our walking foot on. So let's get that walking foot on. Mine's a little bit of a pain in the neck because I have to take the screw all the way out. Which taking the screw out's not bad. It's getting it back in again. So remember, if you have the walking foot like this one with the little arm, this arm is going around the screw that, you know, you have a screw that holds your needle in where you unscrew it to take your needle in and out. This goes around that so that when that needle, when the needle screw or the whole, what do we call it, shaft goes up and down, that's what moves the teeth of this type of walking foot. This is a mechanical walking foot. So let me just, so I want to make sure I put that piece around my screw of my needle screw, and then put the rest of the way on. You can't put your foot lined up with the shaft and then put that piece around the needle screw, because you won't be able to move it right. All right, see, this was, pardon my head. I was so busy winding a bobbin that I didn't put my let's see. Oh, well, see that? I was trying to be smarter about it. You know, when you're trying to hurry, you actually are slower than if you didn't hurry to start with. Crying out loud. Now I'm dropping the screw. No, I think I got it now. Oh, gee, this could turn into an extra half-hour video. All right. Honestly, it doesn't normally take me this long. There we go. Now I think I got it. That'll give you a minute to get yours on, get your foot on if you don't have it on, or just fast forward. I just want to make sure that I have it on there tight enough. And when you're using this type of walking foot, every now and again, stop and double check your needle screw to make sure it didn't loosen, because it can loosen on you. And also check the screw of your actual foot. Because it's mechanical and it's moving up and down and all around, sometimes it can loosen up. Okay, so here we go. So again, fabric is face down. We've lined up with the line. We've pinned. And now we want to have our 1/4-inch seam. So if you're using a 1/4-inch seam with the guide, now using a 1/4-inch seam with the guide, you're going to have to be a little careful as you bump past these seams. Okay, so just take your time, and if you need to lift your presser foot up and down to make it easier, just roll along slowly. Okay, so let's get our first border on. And remember, as we come up to the pin, we're going to make sure we take the pin out, but also make sure that you're still lined up with the line. And I mean the line that you drew. Oh, remember, I told you this machine likes to go 2,000 miles an hour. And you notice I stop and I keep moving this fabric up. If you need to, make sure your fabric is up on the table so it's not dragging down on the floor, and that will make it a little harder for the machine to feed through nice and smoothly. Whoop. Now, we won't have to draw that line every time once we get our first border on. The only reason we had to draw that is just because our edges of our strips might not be perfect. I'm trying to use the pedal with just my toe. Now, if you end up with a little extra fabric at the bottom, that's fine. That's only because we're using batting and the walking foot and it's pushing everything down. Okay, so we have it all stitched down. And again, there's going to be some here. Now, the only issue I'm going to have with this is because I used a white fabric that it may show a little bit, but you would have a seam allowance anyway, so I don't worry about that. So let me get my little baby pressing mat out. Because remember, we want to set our seam before we flip it. Okay, then we're just going to flip it and let the iron do the work, and we just want to come out, and I'm lifting as I'm going up, but we don't need to be out at this edge pressing, because that can throw your, my pressing mat's coming with me, that can make a little wave in your border strip. Now I've got white on white, but you can see at least now how nice and neat that's looking. So we're going to turn around and get ready to do the other side exactly the same. Okay, so we want to make sure we're nice and flat. And we're going to do the exact same thing we did before. So we're going to line up our ruler with whoever is the most to the, whichever strips are most to the left. Now, if you're a real stickler, well, I don't think it makes any difference. I was going to say, it should be about the same distance the whole way down, because your ruler's nice and straight. I was going to say if you want to be a stickler and have an exact number in between, but I don't think anybody really cares about that. You know what I mean? Like it's 7.5 or 7 or whatever. But I think we can just go with our edge. And you should see this is the same distance from this border to the ruler. See how it's the same space the whole way down? So I'm just going to double check and make sure that I've picked the skinniest part. And I mean the skinniest this way, strip. I want to be into the left, whichever fabric is into the left the most. And I think I'm good there. So again, I want to make sure I'm straight across the top. I want to make sure that my lines are lined up as best as you can with the seam, or in the case of, let me see if you can see one. Which one can you see? All right, so say, here's my solid line. I'm going to push it up. Okay, so my solid line going across there may not be right on the seam, but it's the same distance away from the seam the whole way across, because you're never going to get this to line up with every solid line. But we want our ruler to be straight. So I'm looking along this side, and I can see that's the same distance. You can pretty well eyeball it. I want to make sure I'm straight across the top. I'm double checking to see if I'm nice and straight with my strips. And then I'm going to go ahead and draw my line. And again, I'm going to draw my line a little heavier. And I'm using my regular fabric pen, my friction one that goes away with heat. And it doesn't really matter because this line is going to be in your in the seam allowance. You just don't ever want to use a pen. And now I got to move down. So remember, if I move down, I want to take 4 or 5 inches of my ruler and line it up with the line I just drew. And then I'm going to again check here. So I'm off here. I can check here. Oh, sorry. I can check here to make sure that distance is the same. I'm lined up with my line I drew. Now remember, when you line up with the line you already drew, you've got to be able to see the line. You don't want to be on the line because then you're drawing in a new place. You want to be able to continue drawing that line exactly in the same place it was. So I'm double checking here. And it all looks good. And I must have done pretty well at this end because my fabric is pretty well straight here. I don't know what happened to me down that end. So you won't be able to see my line here because it's straight with the fabric, so it's a little bit on the batting. It's a little harder to draw on your batting. But you can see my line. See my line there. Oh. And you can see how some places I've got more fabric and then I have less. But my line is straight. So when I did my strips, I tried to be as close to perfect as possible. But you know, we're never going to sew perfect. We want to sew as perfect as we can and make sure it all looks nice. But see, I almost tried to grab the end of my strip that I cut off. But you know, I'm always telling you, this isn't your prom dress. It's just a table runner. And table runners are a great place to practice your skills before you might do your first big project. Right side down. And I'm lining up with that line I drew. And I want to make sure I'm lined up with that top edge. I'm going to stick this pin over. I'm going to stick this pin way over here. That way, when I put my foot down, I don't immediately have to take a pin out. I'm going to go down to the other end, lining up with the edge, because this is what I would do if I was putting a border on a big quilt. And again, I'm going to repeat. You might as well have the same one habit for all your borders, no matter what you're working on. Is there going to be an exception? Probably. I want to make sure that I stay nice and smooth, flat. I shouldn't have to worry too much about my fabric underneath. I just want to make sure that this didn't flop over. Now, I sprayed mine last time, and I have to say the spray, that's been a week, and that spray stayed better than I thought it was going to. And we're working our way out, so if we need to smooth out that backing fabric as we go, it'll just go out to the edge. And let me just check the chat. No one's chatting today, so I'll chat with myself. Just wanted to make sure there was no questions as we go, because sometimes you might have a question and I've already gone past that and I can't get the sample back to where to answer your question well. So I just want to double check. Okay, so we're all sewn down again. Pinned down. So we're going to go ahead and stitch, and again you're going to use that 1/4 inch, and I'm going to move my machine back a little bit because I'm hanging off the edge too much. So maybe you can see even better. So I don't have much table. Like the end of my table is almost right here, and I don't want all this hanging off. And I'm on a cutting table, so if I sit down and like put the quilt or whatever it is in my lap, I'm too far down. It's going to drag, and you'll feel it because you'll have to keep adjusting and hanging on because it'll keep wanting to go crooked, and that's because of that weight. So I'm going to get this started. I'm going to turn my pedal so I don't give it too much gas. Oh, my pedal came unplugged. Oh, little malfunction. My pedal plug wire was caught around something, so when I just moved the pedal, it unplugged it. We're back in good order. So remember, I've got that pin over here, and I'm going to just leave that in until I get going a little bit. So now I can take that pin out. And I'm going to bring my quilt up, or my runner up a little bit, so it's on the table, and not dragging. It's not dragging back, pulling back down away from feeding through. So again, my hands around the area. I don't need my fingers anywhere near my needle. My needle doesn't need my help. So every time you want to stop every little bit, because there's no award for stitching from one end to the other without stopping. There's no trophy for that, because you want to stop. Sometimes you might want to lift your foot up and put it back down again just so the fabric relaxes. I want to keep an eye on when I take a pin out to make sure that I didn't move away from that drawn line. I'm getting down near the end. Double checking my line. There we go. Oh, I heard that. My thread broke. Now I have to look and see where my thread broke. And because my thread broke, so I like these things to happen because they'll happen to you. So I need to get back to where my thread broke. But because I'm in the middle here, I'm going to have to do a locking stitch. So let me just get my... And I want to look and make sure and see if there's a reason my thread broke. So I always double check to make sure that the thread is running through smoothly through all the areas where it has to go. This machine threads threads left to right, so it has kind of a funny threader. All right, now, like everything, this generally takes me 2 seconds. So I want to just make sure I got my needle in the right position. All right, might be because I'm standing over the whole thing that I'm not quite in the right place. There we go. That was all. My head was in the wrong spot. If I stuck my head in your way, I apologize. So I'm going to go back about 1/2 inch over where my thread stopped, where my stitching stopped. Make sure I'm lined up properly. I'm going to do a couple stitches. And then in this machine, I have to stitch backwards. I don't have a stitch in place, but I just stitched a couple stitches back. So by going over where I stitched and it stopped and locking, I'm locking the stitches that ended at the same time I'm locking the stitches that are going forward. So that locking did it double duty. Okay, I'm coming to the end, so my last pin is out. So, can you see how I'm all bunched up here? So that means my machine's not stitching correctly. It seems to be okay. Let me double check the other side. Oh yeah. So look, can you see all that mess? So I'm going to check my bobbin. And generally, when your thread breaks or something happens, you should always take your bobbin out, check it, and rethread it again. Now, in these metal bobbin cases, your bobbin goes in opposite of what a drop-in goes in. So if you have both machines, sometimes you have to remember that they don't thread in the same direction. Bobbin doesn't go in the same direction on both of them. Okay, so let's see if I can get this out quickly. But today's a day, isn't it? So where did that start at? Oh, it's on the whole piece. I had an issue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and leave that, and I'll fix that after, because you don't have to sit through me, only because it's a long way to go. I just want to pull part of it off so I don't forget. And then we'll go ahead and do our next strip. Well, I was going to say at some point it probably will come out easy, but can you see how let's see. Oh. Yeah, can you see that big mess of stuff there? So what I need to do is I need to stop and do a little strip to make sure it's going to be all right now. So now you can see, you can see it there. See that big mess it's making? So let's see. I'll only fuss with this for a minute. See what could possibly be going wrong, because it was stitching fine before. And I don't want to hold you up. I'm just you can't see, but I'm rethreading the machine. And I'm going to cut off some of this thread. And I did check it to make sure that everything was stitching fine before I started. Honest, I did. So I'll give it one last chance, and then I will just show you how the next part goes if I can't stitch. Because it's basically going to be all right, so I had it threaded and stuck to my finger and pulled out. Does that ever happen to you when you have a thread that makes a little loop and you mistakenly pull the thread the wrong way? All right, let's see if it will stitch correctly now. I'm not seeing my bobbin thread, so let me double check that. And I want to make sure I'm going in the right direction. You know, never assume because you've done something 1,000 times that on 1,001 you did it right. Because sometimes our minds are just on other things and we think we got it right, but lo and behold, we didn't. I have to remember on this machine, I have to pull my bobbin thread up. Sometimes I forget that. But we'll just leave that long. Let's try it one more time. And if it, like I said, if it doesn't work, you don't need to watch me fiddle around with it. Oh, it looks like it's back to behaving itself. It looks good. So what I'm going to do, I don't normally do this, but what I'll do is I'm going to run down this seam again. And, oh no, I was going to say I was going to leave it, but I can't leave this because remember we're doing quilt as you go. So I have to look at the other side and see if I did. Look, I started to have an issue there. Do you see it? So I have it on both sides, okay? So here's what we're going to do. Let's just push that machine over. And we're going to pretend that we're all done. Both sides. So we're going to go ahead and do the next strip. And the next strip, this was cut 1.5. The next one is cut 2.5. So if you were working with a jelly roll, you wouldn't have to do any cutting at all. I want to make sure that I cut off that salvage. So I want to make sure that my ruler's lined up straight in both directions. Okay? And whatever measurement you got going down before, it's going to be the same exact thing. We didn't add anything to the top or bottom. So all your strips, so I think mine were 33.5. So all your strips are going to be the exact same length. So now it's easy. And I'm sorry I have white there. You have to blame Rhonda for that one. So now we don't have to draw that line. We've got the nice straight edge of our other of our last border. So, and I'll just sew this one a little way so I can flip it over. So I want to make sure I'm lined up at the top. So I'm lined up, and I'm lined up now with the raw edge of the first inside border. And again, I would go ahead and pin down at the other end, but I'm only going to go so far, just so I can flip it over enough so that you can see it. And then I'll just, I'll pick it out. I'll pick it out after class. That'll be my homework. But I want you to be able to see what it's going to look like. So again, my 1/4 inch seam, I'm starting at the top. I'm going to stitch a little ways, and then I'm bringing my runner up onto my table. But I still want to make sure this whole area is nice and flat and straight. And I'll just go a little ways further. I want to make sure that I check that it's against that other border, raw edge to raw edge. Okay, so we'll take that pin out. So we're going to pretend I went all the way down to the other end. We're going to press. I don't want to press this because I don't want to press a seam in that I'm going to undo. So we would press, 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 and then with the iron, flip this over and press. So there's our second border, okay? And you would do the same on the other side. And then our third border, if you want a third border, again, I've got to cut off my salvage, which I really should have done before. And again, this strip is the same length as these two, and the two on each side. Nothing's changed. And now you can really see right sides together, line up at the top, put the pin in. So I put that pin you can see right here. That just allows me to get my foot down, stitch a little bit, and not have to, if I have a pin right at the beginning, I have to take it out before my foot can even go down. And again, I would go ahead and pin at the bottom, and then come back and pin. And I'll just stitch this one a little ways, just so you can see how it's all going to look. Just get it started. Okay, my needle goes down. Remember, that's my third hand. I'm just going to pick my table runner up, and you can see I've just folded it like that because I only have like this much table. So we adjust how we do things to how much room we have. You're not going to have a lot of room in front of your machine because your machine tends to be close to the edge of your table. So sometimes you can push it back a little bit. I'll do that a lot so I have room, but I'm not bunching it up. See, I got it neatly folded, and I can't help myself. My hand is here when I take my pin out, so I'm not shifting my fabric, but I am going to double check to make sure I'm still running along that edge. And I would, again, go all the way to the bottom. Okay, press to set my seam all the way down. And then with my iron, press this out. So let's see if I can turn this so you can see how that's going to look. Okay? Then what you're going to do is, once you have your borders all on, you're going to go ahead and trim off your excess batting. And when you do that, you remember in the first video how we kind of squared up our ruler. So let me get a bigger ruler. This is, and I don't have one handy, this is when 12.5 square, 14.5 square, 20.5 square is perfect, because we're going to square up, which means, so if I'm squaring this up, I want a square ruler in that corner, because I'm not just trimming across, I need to make sure I trim across and everything is even with the side at the same time. So then I would take another ruler and add on if I need to. So now I have a clear cutting area. Okay? Now, if I had both my borders on, I'm not going to trim this, but if I had both of my borders on, I want to make sure that this ruler is also in line with my other borders. So if I look here, you can see this line right here. That goes right down the center of my little inner border. So I know my ruler is straight, everything is square, I'm right to the edge of my fabric, and again, I want to be to the edge of the skinniest part of my fabric. I hate to have to undo this, it came out so nice. And then I would just cut across. Okay? Then I'm going to turn it. I'm leaving that square there. And now you can use your longer ruler. I'm just going to use this one because it's what I have. Oh, you know what? See if I can get it on there and still stand close to the edge there. So here's my next ruler, and I know you got light there. I'm going to align that ruler with my square. Make sure it's straight the whole way down. Okay? I want to make sure my lines are straight. And I'm going to cut down like 3/4 of the way. And then I'm going to go turn it all the way around and do this corner again. So I want to make sure. So let's pretend I'm all the way down. I know I'm going to be backwards. So let's pretend this is the bottom, only I'm going to be backwards because this is the top. So it'll be straight down in this direction. So now we've become a lefty. So we're just going to have to pretend that we're on that side. Because if you're right-handed, you're cutting over there. I want to come down about 3/4 of the way from this edge when I stop cutting, so that I can then put this ruler, the square, in the corner again. And if you have a great big square, that's fine. I want to make sure that I'm squared up and then bring my ruler down to make sure it lines up with this one. And you're going to have times where these lines aren't going to be perfect because we don't stitch perfect. So you're just going to so if you're off a little here and you're off a little here, you're just going to do a in the middle adjustment. So a little from this side, little from this side adjustment. But the eyeball, when you're looking at this, is going to be looking at these strips. So we don't want to have one part of the strip 2 inches and one part 1.5 inches. So we want to be as close as we can. Remember, on this little strip, we cut it 1.5. It finishes at 1. So that one you've got to be a little more careful trying to stitch as straight as you can. Because it's so narrow, you're going to notice it off a little bit more. But it doesn't have to be perfect, but you want it to be as close as possible. So then you would, pretending we're on the right side, then you would finish squaring up, and then you would just repeat for the other side. And then you'd be all set to put your binding on. And I think if you look back, and I'll try to remember to put a link at the bottom, if you look back on my Saturday Sew Along, it was a 3-part, and the third part, I believe, I did binding. I'll do another video with binding again. I just I can't do any binding today because I have to undo all of this. That's the technical difficulty of live. So maybe I can finish this up because I can't replace this video and add on and do a binding. But I know I do have on the Saturday Sew Along from last year, maybe April, May, somewhere in there. And I will try to find it and put a link for it. I got to get this all fixed first so that I'll be able to show you what it looks like in the end. I'll put it on Facebook. So is there any questions for today? Hi, Christine. How are you today? So, Christine, you were late. So I had technical difficulties with my machine, and I wasn't able to finish sewing both sides. But we got one side with the borders. The other side will be the same. And this looks funny here, Christine, because I only sewed this far down because I got to take it back out again because I had underneath tension issues. So that's about how that's going to look. I can put these on. Oh, what did I do with the other one? Hold on. So I'll fold that out. And I'll put this one down. And then I'll put this one down. There you go. So now you can get an idea of how that's going to look. Isn't that pretty? I like it. I'll like it better after I undo all that stitching and restitch it again. Okay, so you're going to get all your borders on, and then you're going to do your squaring up like I just showed you, and then put your binding on. And again, if you're not sure how to do binding, I have a video. I'm sure it's April, May, somewhere in there on a Saturday in the Saturday Sew Along or the Sew Along, and I did binding on something small there that you can see. Some of you already have your favorite way of doing your binding. So it all works out. But the nice part of this is quilting's all done. Nothing more to do but square up and put the binding on. And squaring up is important because you don't want it to look askew. I don't know what another, tilted. You don't want it to be tilted. So make sure you take the time to square up. And again, don't be hard on yourself. Don't try to have it perfect. If you have a line that doesn't stay straight the whole way down, kind of average out, following that line as best you can. The bigger the quilt, the more you'll run into that kind of a problem. And remember, it's a table runner, not your prom dress. Get it done as nicely as you can, and move on to the next thing. Maybe make another one. This is a fun project, and this is a good time to make a few table runners that are going to be for Christmas presents this year, or birthday presents, or whatever, or make a few for different holidays, different seasons for yourself, because it goes pretty quick, doesn't use a ton of fabric. I think we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I want to say this is maybe 3 or 4 strips more. These are 2.5 by 8 cut for anyone that didn't follow the first part. Okay, make sure your batting is a couple inches bigger on all your batting, and your backing is a couple inches bigger all the way around than what your project is, because you're going to cut it down when you're done. You need that extra room. If you're making yours longer, you're going to have to piece these strips because they're only going to be about 40 inches, maybe 42. And you just sew 2 strips together, and that's that. Okay, so thanks again for joining in. Sorry about the technical difficulties of the machine. Like I said, I didn't want you to sit here while I picked out, 30-something inches of seam on a nice Saturday before Mother's Day. A lot of you probably have some plans or things to do, or just hang around and drink a cup of coffee or tea. So thanks again for joining in. And next Saturday Sew Along will be the beginning of June, and I will post something in Facebook. I'm trying to make it for the for the first Saturday of each month at 10. Sometimes I might have to work, so that has to change. I'd like to be more specific for you. But I always come on 10, 15 minutes early so that you can get the notice, so you'll be able to have time to watch. So thanks again, everyone, and have a great day.